Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Chris Province, and today I am excited to be joined by my friend and colleague, Ben Scholl. Ben, how are you today?
I am well. Nice to be with you, Chris.
It's awesome. Thank you for being here. So for those of you that don't know Ben Scholl is the strategic projects leader here at Player Performance Group, where we do work focused in gaming and hospitality. And Ben and I have the good fortune of meeting with a lot of different hospitality operators, hoteliers, and working through people practices and operational processes to really accelerate performance of that business. But, I'm not going to dwell too long on that, Ben. Let's hear a little bit about kind of how you got involved in the space, a little bit about your background and where you've been.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in hospitality now, almost 20 years. And it really all started with what was just a job that later became a calling, that later became purpose. And my personal purpose is to elevate the lives of people I care about. And one of the things that's really exciting as I have grown and developed throughout operations is people often come to us in the service industry just wanting to get a paycheck, make a transaction, do the thing. And when it's done really well, you can take some people maybe who didn't have a lot of opportunity and create a really great environment and great opportunity for people who there aren't a lot of roles out there that do that for them. So over time, grew up through many, many different types of hotels, worked in all sides of operations and casinos, not casinos, you name it, I did it, food and beverage. But yeah, I've really, really excited mostly about all the relationships I've developed over a lifetime of working in hotels and hospitality.
Yeah, I think something that's super interesting that kind of frames up a lot of the conversation that we'll have today is this idea of heart of house, right? Or what is the heart of a company? And I think it's really interesting. I hear you use the words a lot, like heart of house, as instead of back of house. Like, why do you do that? How did that originate for you? And like, when did you really adopt that language?
Yeah. So it started really great mentor of mine, Roy Ibalo, in Vegas. And one of the things that he was exceptional at was making people feel seen. And one of the ways that he did that was through language that he used. And he was a mentor of mine, someone I worked closely with during my years in Las Vegas. And words really matter. And, we tell our front desk and we tell our servers, oh, you're the face of the company. How you show up for our customers, it makes a huge difference. And it makes or breaks their experience, which is true, right? They're right in front of the customer. But then we tell typically we're like, oh, you clean, you're the back of house. Your work's really important and we love you, but you're the back. And, it was there that the phrase, I honestly don't know where it came from because it's been in my vernacular for so long, but the phrase of like, hey, isn't this like the heart of what we do? Like at the end of the day, the product we're selling is created by the people who do all these things behind the scenes. And we may have a face out there, and that's the people that talk to customers, but we have this heart that makes the whole ecosystem work and is the flow of what we do. So over the years, I've continued to use the language. I have found that it's not just the language, though. It's the message that it sends when you're mentoring and developing others who are serving in this context. Like, hey, let's talk, how's this going to impact the heart of the house? And asking that question when you're sitting there in the room, we're going to do this really huge event and we're going to turn these things really quickly, or we're going to do whatever the thing is you're doing. And instead of saying, what's the back of house role? It's like, hey, what's the heart going to do to make this flow happen for us? So Yeah.
Mhm. That's nice. And really, I think it does elevate that idea that, um, those team members are seen, heard, understood, really integral to the process that we execute. Um, and at the end of the day, our heart of house employees really desire the same functions and have the same motivational principles as everyone else. And I know a couple weeks ago, you and I, as we approached like housekeeping day, right? National Housekeeping
Yeah.
Day, uh, we wrote an article together that was titled Elevating Housekeeping Roles in Hotel Operations. And, I want to kind of say right here is, even though this article that we put together was about how to elevate hotel ops and housekeeping roles, I would like everyone to kind of hang with us here and listen for the threads that really apply to all people in all roles. And we're going to go through a case study of how we bring path to growth and process design and human connection to this specific function. But every role in organization has to achieve those things in order to create like that high performance team. But let's start, because I know it was one of our late night conversations where we kind of spurred the idea to write this article together. So let me ask first, why is it important for you to champion and be a voice for these housekeeping roles?
I think it's at the core of why I'm in the industry, which is hospitality and service, when done well, can not only just create great experiences for our customers, but it can be a really rewarding experience for the partners that work for us and work in our operations, so employees, if you will. Um, but what, the flip side of that coin is when it's not done well, it can have the inverse impact. And one of the things that I'm passionate about when I mentor and talk to and support hotels is we've got to thrive all around our operation, because without that, your hotel or your restaurant or whatever service quarter you're serving isn't thriving. And I think often we look at our guest remarks and we look at various things and we're like, hey, this is all front of house stuff. We got to change this, change that. And we forget about thriving is something that is through and through. A body's not healthy if just the brain functions really well. You need the whole thing in order to bring to life a really healthy body. So it's at the core of what I think is the most important work.
I think it goes back to the idea as well that we all need to have a champion, and we need to intentionally champion other folks. And that intentionality is our theme for this year on Magic in the Room. Just intentional leadership. What can I notice? What can I choose to make better? And displaying the courage to make it so and bring those things to light. And I think here it's this need to, make certain these partners, these team members, have the same access to leadership and career path and growth and development that any other team member would in our organization. And
Mhm.
if we don't carry that flag, then who will? And so I think taking that podium and making sure that these team members are looked out for and are visible is mission critical. So let's dig in just a little bit. There is a link to our article in these show notes. So if you want to check that out and pull that down, you can. But really, we spoke about housekeeping's role in really cultivating that vibrant and sustainable brand, right? Like, how can we help them thrive? This question of, if we know it takes thriving team members to activate vibrant, sustainable brands, how do we bring vibrancy and thriving to this particular set of team members? I think one of the things we can call out is hope. This idea that tomorrow can be better and we have the power to make it so. So how do we champion like really clear pathways, right? That critical component of hope, that we have some goal and some clear pathway to get there. But the first thing we really dove into was establishing clear paths to growth for housekeeping team members specifically, and what could that look like? So, as you've applied this notion, what does that look like in hotel operations and housekeeping environments?
Mhm.
How do you create paths to growth?
Yeah, the way that I view it is that it's one thing to say, hey, everybody can grow here and go to the next role. It's another to have a roadmap. So it's really important, if you have a manager and you're working with them, you're going to have a performance plan where they're like, hey, these are the things you're going to work on and this is your next step. It should be no different, right? And when you're talking to a heart of house team member, the hurdles are going to look different, but you need to have those really achievable intermittent hurdles that aren't just, hey, someday down the road you might run this place, but hey, next month or 3 months from now you get this really drilled in, and here's some additional responsibility you could take on now. And then you do that really well, 3 months, 4 months, whatever that looks like, you can have this additional thing. So the way that I have imagined that is, taking the paradigm of how we inspect quality and kind of flipping it on its head and making it a thing that is co-owned as opposed to divided. So typical model, right? You have inspectors inspect rooms, you have housekeepers clean rooms. These folks say, hey, this room needed this and this, and they fix it. The housekeepers say, oh my gosh, I didn't do that, sorry, and they move on. What I love to imagine is you use that inspection paradigm to say, hey, how can we create owners who act like owners and show that they're business owners of what their business is, which is cleaning, so they can continue to grow in their careers. So like everyone probably starts off as a learner, learning the role, learning what good looks like, what maybe clean looks like, because sometimes there's some alignment work. So typically you get an inspector. Now they're more of a role of a mentor, right? Where they're like, hey, you're brand new, let me show you where there was some opportunity. They're like, okay, got it. So first few weeks, months, maybe you're learning. Then you graduate, if you will, into, okay, I'm going to own my role now. So I'm an owner. What does that mean? Well, it means I'm going to still get that check-in. So they're going to inspect a few rooms every week, maybe one, maybe two, depending on how many I'm cleaning. And then I have the ability to say, hey, I can self-inspect because I know what good looks like, and I'm co-owning this work. And it's a little bit of pride in there. Usually it should be rewarded in the world, according to Ben, right? With some sort of compensation, a little bit of raise. Hey, I'm now an owner. Down the road, right? You could eventually grow into what I would call an advising role. That's where you are the best at what you do. We maybe have a cadence of once a month. We're going to check in to make sure that you're still at the best at your A game, but you're there to help mentor and develop others to become good. What you've created here is a roadmap. Within the next year, I can take 3 steps forward and really see on paper, I am now a different stage of my career, and I'm growing towards something, which is I'm growing towards being a leader as opposed to just a person who checks boxes, because now I'm advising, I'm leading others, I'm mentoring others around me, and I'm heading down the path of what it takes to jump from just having a individual contributor role to actually leading others.
And so this idea that I can go and onboard into a role, learn those technical ropes, and say, okay, I'm learning. I'm basically developing competence, learning what good looks like, not necessarily always achieving that vision, right? But I develop that competence. Somebody stewards me to that new level of competence. And now I take full ownership of my role. I start self-inspecting. I have fewer kind of formal inspections from whoever has oversight, and I also elevate my pay, right? So I come in with limited competence and confidence. As that elevates, I take on more ownership of my role, have less oversight, elevate my compensation, and then move to another role where I'm no longer have oversight, but now I become the inspector of other junior associates, right? Or junior team members. And kind of achieve the role of I'm a doer, but I'm also a full inspector or trainer of junior personnel. So I think in that model, what we're talking about is a way that any team, any frontline role can have a ladder for growth and development, right?
Absolutely.
And I think in that our goal is really to create hope. And what I want to ask the folks that are listening today is, when you think about your when you look at your team members and you assess the presence of hope, like scanning their career paths, how hopeful is their position based on our current practices? Like, are these vibrant jobs? Do we have full confidence in the team around us to create outstanding impressions upon the guests or customers that visit our stores? Or are these like really cyclical positions? We're always short staffed. Is the department kind of have these chronic labor problems, right? And I think the presence of hope and the development path changes the game in that regard. Now, another kind of key feature that we discuss is kind of the work. I'll say the job design as also product, right? So me as an employer, one of the products I need to build is the job processes and the job design and the job tooling for the people that are doing the work. So if you don't mind, kind of take a minute and explain, like, when you think about best in class organizations, like, what's that work process look like? How do we inform the work process? And who's really involved in creating those?
Well, I think the best way I could put this is there's two ways to kind of look at things. One is a chain where you run an organization and, okay, customer wants this, and we push all this stuff down. So like stuff rolls down. And then there's an ecosystem. And I think work that done well, or products created well, are created as an ecosystem where there's inputs and outputs from all the stakeholders. So, I know hotels the best because it's where I spent most of my career. Often there's one way to look at it, which is the customer says this, so we're going to do this thing, right? What I think is a perhaps even more effective way to go about that process is, here's the universe of things that customers are going after. And here's the universe of things that would make it easier or more efficient or create engagement with the team that does the work that is in the heart of house, and perhaps some degree the front of the house. Where do they overlap? Because those are the things that we should go after with radical enthusiasm. Now, it doesn't mean we'll never do something that might create, some sort of imbalance, but you have to have those imbalances happening in balance, if that will. Yeah. So the idea is it's an art as opposed to this general legacy of business saying, what does the customer voice say? That's the thing we do. Whoever's down there doing it, we're here to, like, servants of the customer. And yes, there's some truth in that. And I think creating an ecosystem of web of benefit is really important when you're looking at designing your products. And some real examples that we talked about in our article is there are little things that we do that have outsized impacts that don't really impact the customer experience. Par levels is a great one. I've seen hotels where might have 20 room types, and every room type has a different number of towels and a different set of linen that they're putting in there. That is extremely complex for a team member or partner to learn as they step into their job, right? Do the customers care if we vary our number of towels by a range of 3? No, but they probably don't, right? They're not like going in the room. The first thing there is like, honey, let me count the towels. That's not what happens.
Right.
So like, make it simple. It's a win for the other side of the equation without a subtraction, right? So there's a lot of examples like that, where if you start to think of it as an ecosystem as opposed to a chain, there's an outsized impact and effectiveness that can create thriving and that thriving will propel your business forward. And it's rarely created with only looking at the customer or guest side of what we're doing or how we're doing it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And this idea that if we extend a seat at the table to the people actually doing the work, then we get to hear things we wouldn't otherwise hear and see things we wouldn't otherwise see. And it's this marriage of what the market wants and what we want to provide the market in what is helpful for our team members to fulfill, right? And being able to fulfill these, we call them demand requests or service requests. So the market has a service request. Now we assess, like, should we provide for that or should we answer that calling? In the key thing about that is to have the conversation with the people required to do the work to say, how best can we fulfill this? Or how painful will this decision be? Like, what is the effect on laundry if we change our par levels? Right? What is the effect on housekeeping if we add these new fancy clocks with all these chargers and ports and all of this? That's when they might say, well, can we add a port or some sort of charging terminal that doesn't have a clock on it? Right? Because everyone has a cell phone. We already got the microwave clock. We don't need another clock. Maybe the last thing we need in the room is another clock for them to change. But we definitely want to service the desire of the market to charge their devices, right? Like, that's a non-negotiable. But, like, do we really need another clock in the room to complicate this process for the staff? So I think those are all things to think about. It's just like, does this process, like, how impactful is it to the guest experience? Like, whether it's two, the variance between room to room is 2 towels or a wash rag and a hand towel, like, it would never make up the cost of varying those pars and stacking those linens differently when we can have a true production line efficiency in order to create value for the team member. So that idea that our work processes are part of our product that we create as leaders, I think that's an important second notion that we call out in the article. And lastly, we talk about, this need for human connection. And I'll kind of introduce this part of the article by saying the trend that we are seeing is that jobs that work in isolation are the most difficult to fill. And I think about line cooks and I think about housekeepers where, my job is to cook the food. My job is to clean the room. Like, we really don't work in pods, right? Everyone has a lane and a job to do, and we go do it. Those jobs are becoming increasingly more difficult to fill. So how do we go about addressing some of that?
Yeah, I think it has to be intentional, and it has to be a system that is designed to include when the facts on the ground make it sometimes against the grain to do so. So yeah, by the facts, I work in a room by myself cleaning. You're going to be isolated unless me as leader, I create systems and processes, and I'm very intentional about pulling you in to be part of the team. Some of the things that are top of mind for me that I see are the most effective is, are we creating space for regular check-ins and one-on-ones? Are we inviting heart of house team members to key meetings where decisions are being made that are going to be really impactful on them? I think of a situation where you're putting on an event. This is a real situation I remember. And, someone has to clean up the stuff they drop, right? Because it's going to be this big concert and you're going to drop something. Are we bringing the team that's going to do that and saying, hey, we got confetti here, or we have this little glitter thing here? And they're like, gosh, I can vacuum this, but this is super hard. I'm going to stay up all night doing it. Like, bringing them in builds connection. And they're like, I have a relationship with this business because I have a seat at the table, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, in how we're making decisions. it creates an outsized impact. Now, you have to do that intentionally, because if you're a hotel director or a general manager, you're sitting in your office, often those team members, employees, they're 50 floors above you, 25, like they're all over the place, right? So you gotta really be intentional about creating space where you're pulling them in and connecting with them. And also systematically making sure that everyone is touched. So I highly recommend, when I talk to hoteliers, that they actually track, like, have we talked to Tom? Have we talked to this partner? Like all the different people, so that they're not forgetting anyone. Because when they're out of sight, sometimes it's easy to not do that. So you got to be really systematic and intentional to make it come to life.
Yeah, it's that idea of, if we are people leaders in the service industry, or even if our product, maybe we sell a commodity type product that relies on service as a differentiator, if we're not creating space for relationship building with the people we're charged to lead and support, then what are we doing? Because that relationship is the only thing that spills over to the guest. In said another way, like, a guest will never receive what the team member doesn't receive. So if we want the guest to feel loved and cared for, guess what? The team member has to feel loved and cared for. And that creates space, or that requires space. That requires a healthy, working relationship between the parties. And we have to create times for conversation in order to do so. But the value comes back to the leader. That's what I always find so ironic and powerful, is like, as soon as we start creating that space, we get all the ideas, all the thoughts, and all the information that we need to make that customer or guest experience better, because we're too far removed from it as leaders, especially as senior leaders, to really know what to action. So if we're not having those conversations, we're really making it hard on ourselves. So kind of, as you think about, as we celebrate housekeepers and say thank you, and we appreciate your contributions to Heart of House, kind of share with me what's been your experience from, like, putting all of this into words and kind of sharing it to the world. What's it mean to you?
I think it's the most important work that those of us in service operations do, is to find ways for the unseen support structure, whatever that is, Heart of House for you, to be seen and to be included. What I had done and recommend is take this idea of giving people hope, take this idea of the product design, whatever you're designing, and this idea of connection, and reflect and pick one thing, and just one thing you can do in the Twix 12 months that's systemic, that will improve the effectiveness in each of those buckets. Now, that one thing might look really different in a hotel than a restaurant, and it might look really different in some other industry that you're serving in. But take those principles, because those principles will have the most outsized impact on your effectiveness, and, like, identify a really tangible change in how you do things that you can put into action in the next 12 months, and incorporate that in your own plans as you're building plans for 2024. I'm going to do this thing, and be really overt about why you're doing it as you bring others along, owners, other stakeholders. I'm doing this because we want to improve or create the great experience in the heart of the house, and this is going to do that.
Yeah. And I think kind of embracing the language. I love the heart of house language. If somebody's got to be the face of the company, somebody's got to be the heart of the company, right? And which teams are those, and how do we continue to invite them in? So let's just maybe we evaluate our decision making processes as we head into 24, and issue almost like gates or stop signs to invite those team members in, and at least say, metaphorically, glitter or confetti.
There you go.
Because we all have the metaphors for A or B, but normally, a senior leader, especially when we start trying to make quick decisions, right? A lot of times we won't think about which one's simplest for our current work processes, right? We look at two things that kind of look the same, right? Glitter's pieces of something, and confetti's pieces of something. What's it matter? It's all just pieces of something, right? Well, that's why we have to stop, insert the gate, and say, hey, does it matter if we do confetti or glitter? Hey, which one would you guys like? Let's have that conversation. And again, elevating intention is really the name of the game. So, so as we kind of sign off here, Ben, I hear you have your clear statement of your personal purpose as you think about 2024 and heading into next year and your strategic plans. Like, what are the things you're looking to do to elevate kind of the activation of your personal purpose? Where do you see yourself going?
Yeah. It's interesting. Careers often have phases, and I feel like I'm on the cusp of a new phase where my purpose will show up differently. And I'm being really intentional about creating that space for mentorship. And that mentorship slightly differently than sitting in a hotel where you have the partners and team members that I was just talking about. It's helping other hoteliers and service professionals see their work as a larger ecosystem of how they can create waves that will radically impact their team members. And then me creating the space to be really intentional about doing that with the people who I interact with most regularly and support. So some of the things that I'm really focused on is creating space, because just like in the hotel, I put processes in place. Those became old hat. I knew I did this and I did that, and I had space because I had that system. I'm creating new systems, mentoring leaders as opposed to leading directly hands-on. And it'll be an evolving process. One thing I know is rarely does new look great and perfect, and being okay with the fact that it's new and the intention's there, and great will follow if we're intentionally refining the initial effort each step of the way to grow and change. And that's where I'm at. So,
well, I know that I learn a lot about hoteling from you every day. So it's been a joy to work with you on different projects, and I look forward to continue to doing and learning together as we win with our partners along the way. Thank you so much for taking the time and building this article with me. I feel like I get to ride shotgun with you and just contribute something that I hope people enjoy. But more importantly, like, regardless if they run a housekeeping department or a hotel or an auto parts store or a local lumber yard, that we can dig in and say, how can I create clear paths to growth, look at the job design as a product that I'm actively building, and cultivate connection amongst our team members and amongst myself as a leader to the folks I'm charged with supporting. I think that's a lofty goal and can be something we keep on our hearts and minds as we head into 2024. I do want to remind everyone listening, we can be found at purposeandperformancegroup.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all your favorite social channels. I just want to let everybody know that Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, that's me, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman, and we're produced by Ben West. Social media management is by Emma Holland and Maggie King Robinson, and our theme music is by Evan Grimm. Be sure to check out his music on Apple Music. And this episode was recorded remotely using the magic of the internet. And Ben Scholl, thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you out there on the road soon.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.